Today I'm speaking with Diane Green. Diane, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's so good to meet you. I'm so excited to hear your story today. And I wanted to get started with a quick bio, just to let everyone know about Diane. She and her husband live in Kentucky, not too far away from me here. I'm in Georgia. She's a mother of six. She's a grandmother, and she's also a community activist. She was a former Christian teacher and minister and a Christian hip hop recording artist. That's really cool. I want to hear about that. Who spent nearly 30 years in the church before deconstructing her faith. And she now has a bold voice for spiritual freedom and healing from religious trauma, especially for women who have felt silenced by dogma. She's also an entrepreneur and the founder of Herbal Creations. That's Creations with a K. I'll have the link for that for her website with this video, which is a holistic health and wellness store. She's also the winner of the 2024 Chamber of Commerce Young Entrepreneur Award and a featured guest on several local news shows. She's the host of the Reclaiming My Life podcast, which again is her YouTube channel. We'll have the link for that in this video. But she explores life after faith, personal growth, and conscious living on that channel. She's passionate about exposing the historical roots of religious oppression, colonization, and control, which is near and dear to my heart. So I appreciate what you're doing there. And again, we're going to go into some more aspects of what she's doing on YouTube later. But for now, if you could, Diane, just tell us more about yourself and maybe some fun things, and then we'll jump into your story.
Um, okay, well, a fun thing that's been going on with me this week is I had with my herbal business, sometimes I do vendor events, and I did an event a couple of weeks ago and decided to make this new lemonade that has sea moss in it. And it just kind of took off for the last week and a half, I've been squeezing and making fresh squeezed sea moss lemonade every day.
Nice. What is that particularly good for?
So sea moss is good for a lot of things. It's good for inflammation. It's got 92 of the 102 minerals that our bodies need. It's good for to get boost your immune system, get rid of mucus, just a whole lot of things. Hair, skin, and nails. So I add the sea moss to the fresh squeezed lemonade with some cane sugar, and everybody's just loving it, and I'm loving it. That everybody loves it.
Sounds like a good drink too for the summertime.
It is pretty tasty.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, I'm so glad you're here again. We're so excited to hear your story. If you could take us back to the earliest days, what did your family of origin tell you about the Lord and about the Bible and salvation? And I'll just jump in with some questions, but we'd love to kind of hear how your journey's been going.
Okay. So I did not grow up in a Christian household. My mother, well, of course, people consider themselves Christians, even if they don't go to church or whatnot. So that's kind of how it was when I grew up. I know the first few years of my life, we lived with my grandparents till I was about 5 years old. And living with my grandparents, I didn't go to church then. But then when my mother married my stepfather and we moved out, there was no church going in that house either. And then as I grew up, I started going to church with friends just every now and then. And my stepfather, kind of ridiculed me for going to church. I never knew what his beliefs were or anything. That was never a question. Because not coming out from a church, it wasn't weird that he didn't go to church or that we didn't talk about church or Jesus or the Bible or anything like that. It wasn't strange to me, but I still didn't understand, why he would ridicule me, for going to church with my friends. And I never has asked the question, or we never talked about it or anything like that. And I know to this day, he still, he doesn't go to church, and I still don't really know what he believes. But as I got older, my mother separated from him, and she was dating a man who was a friend to a man that I eventually married, my first husband. And the course of that friendship, the course of that time that they were dating, she started going to church with him. He was a regular churchgoer. So she started going to church with him, and the guy I was dating, who I eventually married, was going to church with them. So I started going to church because I felt left out. That's how I originally started going to church regularly. They were going, I felt left out. I was like, I want to go to church. So I was a young adult by this time.
So
And
did you, as a kid though, did you understand at all what they were mostly preaching?
No. And I can remember as a really young child, when my mother did get married and we moved away, one of the reasons I could come back and stay with my family here in this community where I live now, I always wanted to come back and spend the night with my grandmother or my cousin and his mom. But if I did, I would have to go to church. So my cousin's mother, was regular churchgoer. So if I wanted to stay a week in the summer, I could come and stay during the VBS time when they had, vacation Bible school. So that was how it would come. Or if I wanted to spend it on the weekends, we had to go to church. But the only thing I remember about that really is that their preacher, I always felt like he was yelling at us. And I felt like we had done something bad because he was always yelling at us. And I didn't like it at the time, but I wanted to be able to spend the night with my cousin. So I went. But I can remember, feeling ashamed or bad, like, what's wrong with us? Like, why is he yelling at us? And, I don't remember, the exact words that he was saying. I just remember feeling like there was something bad or wrong with us because he was yelling at us, like we were in trouble.
Yeah. I didn't grow up quite with that all the time, but I had it sometimes enough to know what you're talking about. And yeah, there's some people that you just sensed like this weird conundrum of like they're doing the Lord's work because they're really preaching it hard. Like you
Yeah,
need to repent, you need to stop sinning, and why are you
yeah,
wasting your life instead of living for the Lord? Like they're preaching hard, so the preacher part of me is like proud of them for being consistent, but
yeah.
the other's like I don't think I'd want to like go out for pizza with you. Like you just seem kind of grumpy. It's weird.
Right.
So with your journey where you're not exposed to Christianity too much early on, was there any part of you that felt like you were compelled towards any kind of religion or spirituality at that point, or were you effectively a secular agnostic at that point who didn't really care about it, or like was there anything that had pulled you in any directions up to that
I
point?
think I think I would probably was a secular agnostic. Um, I didn't really, I knew of people around me. My friends were going to church regularly with their families, and everybody, around me went to church. My next door neighbor, she was very much, a Christian and going to church. But because in my house it didn't get discussed or talked about, it didn't really affect me, um, one way or another. I do remember another time, like to me, I think going to church back then was just, I always just ended up being sad or crying or hurt. Cause I can remember another time going to church and I guess it was just the music and just the emotion and everything that was going on. I ended up crying and my friends, we were on the back pew and my friends were like, do you need to go up? And I'm like, go up for what? Like, but I didn't know why I was crying, but I didn't want to go up. I knew that much, but they were like trying to encourage me to go up in front of the church and stuff. But I never knew why I was crying. And I think that I'm a very empathic person. So, cause I don't go to funerals because I feel like I can feel all of that energy, all that, sadness and everything. Like it's difficult for me. And so I think that just being in churches when I was young like that, I didn't understand what was happening, but just feeling all of that emotion in there I would always end up crying and being, and not knowing why I was crying. And so, like I said, I didn't actually become a church member or a Christian or get baptized or anything until I was an adult, a young adult with children. And just because I wanted to go to church with my mom and I've been through a lot in my life. I've been through a whole lot in my life. From feeling neglected growing up and just getting involved with a lot of things I shouldn't have been involved with and not really having I don't know, not really being on a good path. So I think when I decided to get involved with church, now mind you, this man that I started going to church with, the reason I was going to church was not a good man. This is my ex-husband and he was a drug dealer and he was abusive and controlling and all these things. But I ended up marrying him and he ended up treating me like I was supposed to be I was supposed to be perfect because he wasn't. And in his mind, as long as one person in the household was doing the right thing by being a Christian and going to church and doing good stuff, then we were all protected, that everything was going to be okay. And he wasn't going to do the right thing, but he basically would beat me over the head with the Bible. Like he grew up in church. He even has a biblical name. Like all his siblings have biblical names. And they used to, read scripture and study the Bible before they would get up and go to school in the morning. Like come from a very Christian home, but this man was not behaving as a Christian. He was not a good guy. He had a lot of things that he was dealing with that made him I mean, and still to this day, he's very abusive, very verbally, physically, just just backwards, when you think about, how he would try to use the Bible. He used the Bible to control me, to say, well, this is what you're supposed to do. Like, I'm the man in the relationship, you're the woman, this is what you're supposed to do. And I think at that point was when I really started feeling like, okay, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is how I'm supposed to behave. And I want to do right by God. I want to do the right things. I want to go to heaven. And so, at that point, I started reading the Bible more, studying the Bible, going to church, going to Bible study, joining the choir, ended up being a teacher, teaching Sunday school. This is all, as a young adult, as I'm married to him and having more children. And I remember, I and my children, the children that I had at the time, I think I had my older daughters at the time. I guess it was 3 children. Can't remember if my son was born yet or not. I don't think he was, but we all got baptized together um, in the church, and I was very
Mm.
active member of my church, very involved in everything.
Can I ask, when
And
you say you got baptized and you got saved, what was it that you understood as the message of salvation? Like, what was it that your pastor said to you, or whatever, whoever led you to the Lord? What did they say that was the understanding that you had to have and the faith you needed to have in order to be in a right relationship with God?
I think at that time, I think it may have been my grandmother's encouraging. At that time, when I was a young adult, I think it was more about me just feeling like I was supposed to do certain things. Now that changed down the line, but at that time, I think it was just me just feeling like, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is the next step in what I'm supposed to do. And that's how that came about. It
Like, if you
wasn't until
obeyed God, then you were in a right relationship with Him.
Yes. Yeah. I was supposed to be obedient. I was supposed to get saved. I'm supposed to, this is what you're supposed to do. This is how, what life is about. You go to church, you get saved, you get baptized, you follow Jesus and do all the right things. And this was, like I said, at home, my husband's telling me these things, and then I'm going to church, and then I got my grandmother, and I just feel like this is what I was supposed to do. But then I backslid. So I think, and then after I backslid, I finally got away from that husband, and I backslid. So a lot of the things that I was doing during that time were basically just performance. It was just, this is what I have to do to be right. This is what I'm supposed to do, and less about relationship. Then it was performance. But then I got away from him, went to prison, and while in prison, I started reading the Bible more, ended up being the chapel clerk. And what that meant was I had an office that I went to every day, and on the prison campus. I had an office that I went to every day. I had people that worked under me, that I was supervisor over. And to me, that felt like God. That felt like God had put me in that place to get me out of trouble, to sit me down and have time to work on me and build that relationship. And in my mind, that's what that was all about. It was like God set me down in this prison for me to get my life together, for me to grow my relationship with Him. And at that point is when it became less about performance and more about a relationship. And you couldn't have told me anything different at that time. I remember at one point feeling like that, God was telling me that I need to stop trying to do everything on my own, and that I need to turn to Him. And that's why I got into trouble, and why my life was so hard was because I wasn't turning to Him, and I wasn't putting enough faith in Him. And so that's when started really building that relationship.
Mm. But at
Our
that
name,
point
go
in the
ahead.
story, when you were in more of a relationship, understanding of how your salvation works, if someone had asked you at that point, what are you trusting in to go to heaven, what would you have said?
What am I trusting in to go to
Like,
heaven?
what if, or if someone said, how do you go to heaven, or how do you have peace with God? What would you have said?
Um, I would have said by obedience, being obedient to God, following the scriptures, being saved, walking with Jesus, studying, congregating, going, being in church on Sunday. You have to have that fellowship. You got to do that. And, spending time in prayer, doing the community work, helping others, bringing other people to Christ. To me, that's what being a good Christian looked like to me. And, I was actually pregnant when I went to prison, and I named my baby Grace. And when people asked me why did I name her Grace, and I said because God gave me the grace to be able to get through the situation of being in prison and away from my family and whatnot. And that's how she got her name. And she reminded me of that not too long ago, because she's still she doesn't go to church, but she still considers herself a Christian. And some of my kids get agitated with me because I have left the faith, and that she kind of brought that up to me the other day, like, this is why you named me Grace. And so yes, honey, I know. I know, honey.
Those are hard
And it's
conversations.
okay.
Just again, I like to often ask questions just to create like a starting point for people's faith journeys. Would you say that the death and resurrection of Christ was central to your faith? In other words, would
Yes.
you believe that it was the whole thing works and it works only because you had a
Christ
sin
died.
problem and he took your punishment?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Christ died to save me. And because he died, I can live. Because he died, I believe that he died for all the sins that I had committed, all the sins that I would ever commit, for all of us. That's what I believed. Um, Wholeheartedly, 100%. Jesus was everything.
Hmm. Now, as you got to that point where you were focusing less on you jumping through all the hoops and more of a relationship, like you said, how did it feel like when you were not in a context where anybody's looking, but just you and the Lord? Did it feel like you were talking to somebody? Did it feel like you were
Hmm.
praying? And did it feel like you had a sense of the Spirit's presence or guidance? Like how intimate did it
Yes.
get?
Very intimate, very intimate. My prayer life at home was very intimate. I read the Bible, I journaled. I probably could find some notebooks now where, that I wrote in, just talking about my walk with Christ and the things that I prayed for. And, I would write down the things, that I was praying for, so that, I would remember that this is what I asked God for. And then he gave it to me. He blessed me with this, down the road, just as a reminder. So as time goes on, I get out of prison and I'm walking this new life. I'm doing everything that I feel that I'm supposed to do. And I got my children back. I'm working, um, and I'm getting back in my own place. Like, everything fell into place for me. Everything was perfect. And at the time, I would have said, God did all of this. God made all of this happen. God is the reason I made parole. God is the reason why I have this job as soon as I get out and was able to get in my own place, even though I'm doing the work, you know, but God did it. And
Mm.
so, and I'm, now I've got all my children back and I'm just working and living my life. And I met my husband that I'm married to now, and he was a rapper. He was a rapper. And so when
A
he met
Christian
me,
Christian rapper?
no, not at all. Not at
Mm.
that time. No, it was music that I was like, you can't play this in front of my children. It was that kind of rapper. And he was very young. He's a lot younger than me. And so, we got together and he started going to church with me. And a few months down the road, he gets saved as well. And we start this Christian life together. We get married, and we're doing the music together. He's writing Christian rap, and I'm singing. He's rapping. I'm organizing events so that we can get the music out, so we can help the community. And I'm inviting other community things, people in the community to these events to share different services. Our focus has always been with people who are addicted, have substance abuse issues and whatnot, because that was the issue that I had, was substance abuse. And so that's where my heart has always been, is helping people with substance abuse, and also people who are, unhoused or hungry, or, people with food insecurities and things like that. So we started doing different events to help with that. And then, of course, we'd always do the music. We'd invite other Christian artists to come and sing and minister. And that's a life that we had for many, many years. That's what we did. And we were very, very committed. I created a logo that I still see people in the community wearing today, t-shirts and hoodies and things that I made that said "For His Glory," because that was our stance, is that everything we did, everything was for His glory. And that's what we wanted people to know. Like that's the only thing that you do. Everything you do is supposed to be for His glory. There's nothing outside of that. And that's what I believed, and that's how I lived. And I'm not going to talk too much about my husband, but he still lives that way, and he's very true to he's very true to that. And but I've been doing this deconstructing since 2021.
I imagine that's just a heartbreaking thing to have big concerns on your heart that you can't necessarily find agreement with your partner. And I've been through that myself, and it's horrible to see that. And you wish so much that there was a way to get on the same page, but that, like I always remind myself, it took me a long time to see certain things that I arguably could have seen, 10, 20, 30 years earlier, and just didn't see them. So if it didn't, happen quickly for me, it doesn't have to happen quickly for someone else. But at the same time, you feel like as a married person, you want to think to yourself, like, we married out of love and respect for each other, including the desire to hear each other out. And it's hard when there's those divergences, but I really wish, you all the best with, hopefully, some times where you can really hear each other out with that. I was just curious with your kids. They, just again, going back to straight, they grew up hearing you tell them about Jesus. So did they all place their faith in Jesus at a young age?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. My children 100% grew up in the church, in Sunday school, going to, I used to facilitate the vacation Bible school, so they participated in that. Very, very much involved. My youngest baby, she's 12 now, and we always called her the church baby, because when she was born, I was singing in the choir. So she would basically she'd sit with one person for a while, and then she'd get tired of them and go to another. Like, you never knew who she was going to be sitting with. She was the church baby. She was all over the place. And, yeah, so yes, everyone grew up that way. Nobody attends, out of the 6 children, the youngest one is the only one who attends church regularly, which she's the one that I have with my husband, that I'm married to now. So the two of them, they attend church on Sundays and whatnot. But the older children, they don't. And a couple of them still consider themselves Christian. And then there's my son, who actually was instrumental in helping me along with my deconstruction. And he's not a Christian at all. And he said he's gonna come on my podcast one day and we're gonna talk about it. But
yeah, that's awesome. I'd love to have you all back together to do a joint interview here too. Can I ask regarding that? I mean, that's definitely a good segue to the next part of my questions. Is what were the earliest seeds of deconstruction? Because it sounds like your story was kind of like you were going through a really rough patch, and then the thing that seemed to smooth things out and put you in a spot of blessing, as we would have said, was the fact that you now had Jesus. And that's a pretty sweet spot to be if you're like, without Jesus, my life's falling apart. With Jesus, my life's doing pretty good. My community is all saying, yes, 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 this is good. Stay on the path. And if you feel like it's real, then you hear His voice, you sense His presence. There's not much reason to get off of such a good ticket. You're on the carousel, and it's, when my kids are on the carousel at the mall, it's like, this is fun and it's going well, and it's a shame it only lasts about 3 to 5 minutes, but while it's going, it's a good thing. Why would you stop is a good question. So what were the early seeds for you that made you think, even though this has been a success, and it has been a help, and it has been such a healing thing for my family and my life, what made you say, still, there's an issue here that needs to be investigated?
So we started questioning things, and it's a little bit challenging for me to tell the story because my story is kind of connected to someone else who's not ready to share, but I'll try to share as best I can. But we in 2020, when most of the churches were not in service and everything, we weren't going to church every Sunday, and it kind of, I think after a while, I was like, okay, we're not in service. We're not getting together every Sunday and everything. And I know the world was falling apart at the time, with COVID and everything, but not for us. Like, we were still good. My husband still had a job. He still, was working, and, we were okay. And although we did get sick at one point, the whole household got sick, and I was nervous and scared about that. But we recovered, and over the course of 2021, we weren't in church or anything. And I had someone present some things to me, questioning the validity of the New Testament. And because they were bringing these things to me and we were discussing the validity of the New Testament, I kind of came to believe that, we went down a road of being Hebrew Israelite, basically what it amounted to. I didn't stay there long, but I ended up there because of a family member that I trusted. And that's where we ended up. And so because of that, I didn't believe anything in the New Testament anymore. I only believed the Old Testament. And I think by getting rid of the New Testament, I think it came to a point that I think in my mind, it was like, okay, well, if I'm questioning the validity of the New Testament, why do I believe that the Old Testament is real? So I think that's kind of how it happened. I just started questioning that. And in my questioning, and it was hard. It was hard. Like, the hardest thing about that was giving up Jesus, because that was scary. like, how do you give up Jesus? And that was real scary, and it was real difficult, because what if I'm wrong? And if I'm wrong, what's going to happen to me? Am I going to burn in hell because I didn't believe? You hear people talk about having fire insurance. I gave up my fire insurance because I was like, I don't believe this anymore. And it was kind of evolution. Well, it's still evolving. It's still evolving. I could tell people what I believe today, right now, and I don't know if I'm still going to believe that. The more I read and the more I study, I don't know. But my main thing is, I don't have to believe anything. Like, I'm not going to be punished for not believing. I finally got to a place of, okay, I don't have to believe anything. Nobody's going to punish me. Nobody's going to put me in hell, and I'm not going to lose out on heaven because I don't believe this. And the more I studied and read and watched YouTube videos, the more information I just started getting that made me feel like I've been lied to. And then, you go through this angry phase of, I'm kind of street, you know what I mean? How did you get that over on me?
Yeah. It is an amazing journey when you really dig into it. And there's just 1,000 little things that can trigger those, little rabbit trails of, let me research this, and everything from the canonicity of which books should be in the Bible, which shouldn't, which versions, the Septuagint, the Dead Sea Scrolls community, the Second Temple Judaism worldview stuff, the Yahweh stuff that you talked about, where does the Old Testament come from? And it goes on and on. And on that note, before I forget, I do want to make a quick plug for anyone that's asking those same questions that we're talking about. There was a great video. I'll have a link for it beneath this video. It's by a guy named Bill Zurcher. It's called Seeing Through Christianity. Have you seen that, by the way, yet?
Mm-mm.
It's fantastic. It's only like an hour and a half, but it's probably one of the best. If you're investigating the origins of Christianity and Judaism, it's one of the best hour and a halves you'll ever spend. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
But it's very, very well presented, and I'd highly recommend it. But it's like, there's all these little things, but I think the thing that's it's amazing about your story is you're giving yourself that freedom to say whatever the topic is and wherever this leads. Number one, I have the freedom. I don't have to be afraid to ask the real questions and be honest about this doesn't make sense. But also just to say, in general, like I really want the truth more than I want what I currently believe. Like my current belief system might be right. It might be 90% right. Whatever, I don't know. But wherever the truth leads, I need to adjust and pivot, and to give yourself that freedom and confidence. And I think what's hard about it for a lot of us is you grow up, at least many of us did grow up with this sense of like God is judging you, the Bible's judging you, the Bible's this firm foundation,
Yeah.
it's this solid rock on which we stand, and you don't break it; it breaks you. But
Hmm.
it's not breakable. It's completely firm. It's completely true. And for you to in any way be the judge of that truth, of the judge of that book, or the judge of Yahweh, is just
Yeah.
it's not just wrong, it's inappropriate, it's disrespectful. It's like you don't get it.
Yeah.
You've tried to turn the world upside down and then say, no, it makes sense. Like it's never gonna make sense that way. Put God back where he belongs. He's there
Yeah.
anyway, but in your mind, put him where he belongs, bow your knee and admit that you don't understand it all. And also just that just because there's a mystery doesn't mean it could be a paradox where it's like this doesn't make sense, but in God's
Hmm.
mind, it does. His ways are higher than ours, and so you just constantly get these messages of bow your knee, to, whether it's talking about like your obedience and your purity, or it's bow your knee intellectually. You don't need
Hmm.
to have all your questions answered. You need to just love God, love the Word of God,
Yep.
and admit He's the Lord and His book is true, and to finally give yourself the freedom to say, you know what, at least not in an intentionally disrespectful way, but at least a little bit. I'm going to academically give myself the freedom to stand in judgment on this book.
Hmm.
For a lot of people, that takes a lot of guts. It really does, because
Hmm.
it's scary territory, and
Hmm.
it's a whole new world once you do that. Especially if you really ask really intensely accurate questions, it's like that whole oh shit moment. Like I thought I was opening up like this little teeny box of questions, and it
Yeah.
became Pandora's box. You know?
Yeah. And I'm still learning. I'm still learning, more stuff every week, every day. Like I'm still learning. And, I watch a lot of the, TikToks lives, the atheist TikTok lives. I watch a lot of those. And even though I don't consider myself an atheist at all, but I learned so much. I feel like you can't learn more about a Bible from anybody more than what an atheist can teach you. They can teach you more about a Bible than anybody. And I enjoy the knowledge. I enjoy the knowledge very much.
Oh yeah, that's very true.
Some of the things that I remember about being in church, being a believer and being very invested in church and feeling like I'm supposed to follow the pastor. It came to a point of just, you feel like you don't have control of your own life. Like you have to have these other people telling you how you're supposed to live your life. And I have so much freedom now and I trust myself. I don't feel like I need to go and talk to a pastor before I make a decision or, um, I have so much more freedom and trust in myself. And I think and I get angry when I think back to the moments and times that I did. Now, I didn't leave church behind church hurt. That's not, why I left. But I did experience church hurt. And when I think back on those times, I'm a pretty strong woman. I've been through a lot, and I'm a pretty strong woman. But the times that I have been in church and felt belittled or felt small, it makes me angry when I think back over those moments. When I recall those moments, I can remember. We lived in Alabama for a while, and I can remember a time down there that I have posted something on social media that, when I think about it now, it was next to nothing, but the pastor stood in the pulpit and made a whole and made it seem like it was just this big ordeal, and made such an example of me. And I remember I cried all day. And
Of you personally?
yeah, and he didn't call my name, but he kept looking at me while he was preaching, and then he called me in the office after the service. And we were going on a trip that day. We had to get on the van. My husband was driving and I was in the passenger seat, and the other members were in the back. And we were going on a 3-hour road trip to another church that day. So I had to be with these people all day. And I remember, I had on my sunglasses and I literally was like crying the whole way there. And my husband didn't even know, like he didn't know, but I could hear them in the back talking about me. And I just remember riding in silence all the way there. And like my husband he didn't even know. He was like, "What is going on? Like what?" And it was nothing. And I felt so low and so belittled and so like I had failed God, like I would just, and I just remember how hurt I felt because I felt like I had done this. I was wrong. And you know, I will never feel like that again in my life. I
That's
will
crazy.
never feel that way again.
That's crazy for a pastor to be calling you out like that, even if no one else knows, just that you know. And I've heard
Yes.
one or two other stories like that, or that get pretty close to it. But it's amazing how a lot of pastors too, I think, just get that sense that their authority can't be questioned, and also that they're
Yeah.
really speaking for God, both in terms
Yes.
of things directly from the Bible, but also just their interpretation of current events. And boy,
Hmm.
once you get your head that big and your authority that collected, and everyone
Yes.
agrees, like, yeah, you don't touch the Lord's anointed, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Once you cross those bridges, man, it goes to people's heads, and it's very sad, it's heartbreaking, and I feel like just it's awesome though, in a sense, if you could say, well, is there anything good that happens in those contexts? The good thing about that is they're showing their true colors, that this is not a truly gracious book about God's amazing
Hmm.
grace. This is just tribalism. This is about power and control. And it's
Hmm.
like when they show their hands, it's very painful to see it. You're like, wow, this isn't what I thought it was. But now I see your true colors shining through. And this is just man made. This is just human stuff. This isn't divine.
Yeah.
This is just people. We might as well be in a club, and two factions of a club fighting. That's all
Yeah.
this is. But can I ask, when you got to a point though where you saw some of these issues coming through, what got you to a point of saying, I definitely don't believe I'm a Christian anymore? Like, was that a long period of years? Like, what was the final thought process in your head when you finally were able to articulate to yourself, I definitely would not call myself a Christian at this point, even if you still had some level of spirituality or something that you were
Hmm.
claiming or
Hmm.
clinging to? Like, what was it like saying, just definitely, I don't believe that I'm a sinner in need of a savior dying on a cross for me?
Yeah. I think it's probably maybe been about 2 years now, since I've been to that point. And, um, it just, like I said, just reading and studying, and I went through the little Hebrew phase. I went through the Hebrew Israelite phase. That probably lasted 6 months. And, and then I just kind of understood that I didn't believe the Bible. I believe the Bible to be a book of allegory. Um, and I do have some level of spirituality, but I don't believe that I have to bow down to anyone, that I have to worship anyone, that I have to, um, that there's somebody that, like I said, that's going to send me to a heaven or a hell. And what I usually tell people when they ask is that I no longer believe in the Christian God, and that's you, it's funny. Well, I say I no longer believe in the God of any book, and I got that terminology from Tristan Harris, and that's kind of what I say. Like I don't believe in the Christian God or the God of any book, and that's what I believe. I believe there's something, but I don't regulate my life by anything but myself. And I don't feel beholden to anything or anyone. And it's so free. After, I went from my parents' home to the abusive, marriage, controlling marriage that I was in, to then, under these pastors that were my God, to now it's just like, hey, I'm free. And my freedom doesn't, since I've been free from all this, I'm not out doing anything that I shouldn't be doing. And I'm still doing community service. I was actually the president of a Christian nonprofit, and I stepped down from being the president, but I'm still extremely active with them. And I just didn't want my name. I didn't want anything that I do to affect them. You know,
Yeah.
them being a Christian organization, I stepped down and still helped behind the scenes because I knew I was going to start the podcast, and I knew I was going to start being more vocal about my non-belief, and I didn't want it to fall back on them.
Mm.
But I'm still very active.
It's amazing when you realize that, like when you're a Christian, you think all the good stuff that you might see in me coming through me in my life is all because of God. And then when you realize none of that's true, you're like, it's just been me all this time. And
Yeah.
it's certainly, I think it starts for a lot of us with prayer. Like I've been praying to myself, not really praying. I've been talking to myself. Basically,
Yeah.
prayer is self-talk. But to realize all those good things you wanted to do to change the world to be a better place, not referring to the gospel, but just I just want to help so and so because they got a flat tire. Help the little old lady across the street with her groceries. Like that's not Jesus in me. That's just me in me.
It's just me.
You know, our consciousness has evolved to give us the sense of empathy and desire to help other people in need. It's amazing when when those things click. Can I ask, was it scary when you were able to articulate that you weren't a Christian anymore? Was there any sense of like the I mean, there's a couple big fear factors that could come in. Like number one, I could be screwing myself for eternity. Like I could be basically damning myself here because we know that according to the Bible, the only way to get to heaven is through the blood of Christ. And if you're saying that's not applicable, I don't believe in the power of the blood, then you're screwing your path to heaven. But then secondarily, there's all these little other things, the warnings that the Bible gives us, such as beware of your pride. You know, it will be, the major sin that causes you to disobey God, and also the idea that the devil's going to tempt you, or just the sense of I think a lot of us got this sense that there's just such worldly wisdom, and they poison the well. Like, don't listen to evolutionists. They're going to sound clever, but they're really, this is all variations on the way that the devil has deceived the whole world. And so you just stay straight on the tight narrow path of the Bible's messages. All these little warnings and red flags that come up to say, just don't leave, don't leave, don't leave. Was any of that really scary to you, especially losing the afterlife or the threat of hell as you got to the most intense part?
Yes, it was very scary. And like I said, I think those TikTok atheist lives are what really helped me, because I would listen to those lives and then do my own research. And that kind of helped me to lose that fear. Because I decided to choose facts over faith. And like, there's too many facts. There's just too many facts. There's too many things that don't add up, that don't make sense. Too many contradictions. And then one of the main things that really bugged me is the whole story of Job, and how we used to look at Job as like, oh, Job, he suffered all this. And, to me, that story, how in the world is God loved from that story? Like, how do you still say that God is love when you read the book of Job? There's, I have children, and there's no way I would allow my adversary anywhere near my children. If the devil is God's adversary, why would he allow him to go and do all those things? And then one of the things on the TikTok lives that they used to always talk about is, God killed more people in the Bible than the devil did. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, kind of a light bulb kind of went off. Like, yeah, that's so true. Like, and then that's when I just really, at that point, was like, okay, this ain't right. This isn't right. And I really started wanting to learn more and more and more about the Bible, which, I was already reading the Bible, but going back and reading the Bible without those Christian tinted glasses on and seeing it for what it is. And, it's just so much. And then I did a little series on my TikTok talking about, the age of the earth and the age of man. And it's like the Bible and science and geology, it's not adding up. It's not adding up. So that was another nail in the coffin. Like, okay, this doesn't make sense. And then I also, I really dig a lot into, the whole thing of slavery, slavery in the Bible, but then also, this slavery, with bringing the slaves here and using the Bible to control them and to make them, and taking away their spirituality that they had and their culture and everything that they had in their homes and just taking that away from them and giving them your God, to take their God away and give them your God. Like, to me, it's just not. That makes me angrier than anything lately. Lately, that's kind of the rant that I'm on lately. But it changes every week. The more I learn, and it could be something else next week. But yeah, to me, it's just taking the time to think critically and ask questions. And I also have a t-shirt line of print business, and I make these t-shirts, and one of the t-shirts I make says, to think critically and ask questions. And it's not that hard. It is not that hard. There's too much information out there for us to look at. And I know everything on the internet is not true. I know that. But you don't even have to go to the internet. All you have to do is just read your Bible without bias and get all the answers.
Well said. It is so amazing when you get out of it, when you look back at it, you just think to yourself, why could I not see it? I mean, I know that that's clear testimony to the power of indoctrination, but it's weird especially when you get past it for a few years, and then you try to put yourself back in your old shoes. You're like, how did I ever believe this? The story of Job, like you said, and the story of the flood with drowning all of his own children. And it's interesting, but even kids, like I talk with my kids about this stuff, and I'll say stuff like, if anybody were to ever drown their kids, would they be a bad daddy or not? And like, yeah, very bad daddy. I'm like, what if they didn't drown? They just held them under for a long time, but then brought, like, even that, like even just getting close to killing your kids by water is a really bad thing. You should go to prison for it. And I was like, well, what if a daddy drowned like all the kids he could find? Like, that person should be in prison forever and ever and ever. And yet we give Yahweh this get out of jail free card because of his supposed holiness that allows him to have a carte blanche to do whatever. And I think it's awesome that, in a sense, Christianity kind of sets itself up to fail, because it teaches you to have mercy, in a sense, not in every sense, but it teaches you at certain verses, be merciful, have mercy, be loving. It says stuff like God is merciful, forgiving to 1,000 generations. And it says things like in 1 John, there's no fear in love. But then so if you have this premise, and often Christians, I think, tend to lean towards those more loving, gracious messages.
Yeah.
And then when you actually go back into the text and see how Yahweh is behaving, you're like, he is contradicting himself. But it isn't just like on a low level, like he's a bad daddy that needs some counseling. Like, he's an absolute freaking psychopath who should go to prison. And I've used the illustration before. Other people have used variations on this, but like, if you had somebody that was like a lady's being proposed to, and the man gets down on one knee and he says all this romantic stuff, I love you so much, I want to spend my life with you, and he pulls out the ring, and like, it's at that moment where you're about to sort of switch from him proposing to her giving the answer, and right before she gets to open her mouth, he's like, just one second, and he goes back to his car and pulls out this bat from his trunk. He's like, I just want to let you know, I really hope you'll say yes, but if you don't, I will beat the shit out of you right now.
Yeah.
It's like, well, at what point do you say to yourself, I know that the messages are all love, 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 but this is not love. Why does it not, come clear to us? It's weird. It's really weird. Once you see it, you can't unsee it until you're at that point. You can defend that psychopath to the nth degree. But it's so cool. But I also think it's, as much as I would wish in some ways for Christians to not have a platform and to keep talking, in some ways, there are times I've thought to myself, gosh, I hope you all keep talking, because the more you talk, the deeper you dig the hole. Like, you can't get out of this. You cannot get out of this. You try to defend God killing babies. You try to defend genocide in, ancient Canaan. Like, you try to defend all that. The more you talk, the stupider this sounds. And it's like, you're doing the job for us. So thank you. Keep talking. The more you talk, the more you incriminate yourself. But once you got out to that point, though, where you were like, I know that I now have a different life. My life is transformed. I still have a lot of questions, but I know my answers aren't there. That's,
Yeah,
I don't know what I know yet, but I know I don't know that. That's not
yeah.
good answer. At that point, what were some of the best parts of being free and learning to sort of restart your life?
Just not having the fear or the doubt in myself, and just being able to, I have businesses and whatnot, and just knowing that I can do everything, any and everything that I want to do. If I choose to do it, I can make it happen. And just the whole thing of, if I do slip up, or do something that's not quite right, that nobody's going to punish me. If I accidentally tell a lie, or if if I, anything that I do, if I wrong someone, which I'm not just out here wronging people, but if I make a mistake, nobody's just standing up above me, just waiting to punish me for it. Nobody is waiting to chastise me or punish me for making a mistake. And just the freedom in that, and making my own choices, and not feeling obligated. I'm not obligated to anything, anybody, anyone. I love my life. You know, as an entrepreneur, I don't have to go clock in the morning. I don't. I, I live. I've never been this free in my life, and that doesn't mean my life is perfect. Yeah, I still have struggles and things that I go through. But at the end of the day, the joy that I have is the joy that I have, and nobody gave it to me. It's 'cause I choose to have it. I choose to be happy. I choose to have joy. I choose um, to be confident. And whether even though I have good days and bad days, and things that's still going on in my life that aren't perfect, I still wake up every morning free and happy.
That's awesome. I love that phrase people have been using, being born again.
Yes, I'm born again, absolutely, and I love it. I love it here. I've been here for 50 years, and I keep telling people every day, I'm gonna have 50 more. And I struggled for the first 50. Whether it was the drugs and the prison and everything, and then the religion and whatnot. But I'm gonna have 50 more to enjoy this freedom that I have. And one thing that we didn't touch on, is I used to do jail ministry. So once I got out of prison, I started doing jail and prison ministry. I've actually been back to. I was doing ministry at the same jail where I was actually had been an inmate. And one time I even got to go back into the prison, where I had spent a year, and I love it, and I miss it, and I would really love to still be able to go into the jails and prisons, and just encourage and talk to the ladies. But as you know, um, that's not gonna happen. Nobody wants me to go in there and talk about how I don't love Jesus anymore.
It is crazy. It's amazing when you think about too the idea that those prisoners are in many ways so desperate. I mean, we're all desperate when we go to church, and it's preying on the needy. But you
Yeah.
think those people of all, number one, there's like this superficial peer pressure to be
Mhm.
religious, because I'm sure a lot of the
Mhm.
parole officers and so forth, like, have you had
Yeah.
a moment that's told you why you shouldn't go steal from so and so?
Yeah.
And so there's that superficial thing, but there's also just the internal sense of like, how do I redeem my life? And if you
Yeah.
have that prison life where you really need to be physically, uh, you know, literally redeemed from prison, but you have
Mhm.
Jesus that's going to redeem your whole life,
Yeah.
it's very very attractive, and it's a hard thing. And I love how in a different context, I've met a lot of people who've talked about AA, where they were in a sense prisoners to alcohol, different kind of addiction issue, but their addiction to alcohol was like their mental prison, their physical prison. And they went to AA for years and were told you have to have this higher power.
Mhm.
And then they realized, like, I do not have to have a higher power, or maybe just as
Yeah.
well to say, I am my higher power. I just
Yeah.
need to change my mind. But it's
Yep.
it's amazing. And I used to do the prison ministry as well. So used to go to a state penitentiary in central Pennsylvania and preach to the prisoners there.
Mm-hmm.
And it breaks your heart to think about some of those situations and the pressure that you're under worldview wise to redeem your life. And it's like they have even less chance to get the full story because they can't just go searching on YouTube. They're in a jail cell. And well, can I ask, with your journey at this point, you're going back to your specific story, your situation with your kids being partially saved and Christians and partially not. What are some of the biggest things you've learned about those conversations in terms of how to both share your journey and, hope that they'll respect your position and where you've come to land, but also how to give them the same respect of, like, you're allowed to, it's my life. I'll believe what I want to believe, but also you're free to believe what you want to believe. How do you handle those conversations?
We respect one another. When I'm making content, my children will go on YouTube and on my TikTok and like all my stuff, and they won't watch it, but they'll like it just to help me out, just to give me likes. So they respect where I'm at, and it doesn't cause us any conflict or any problems. I respect them, they respect me. And I know one of my daughters, two of my daughters, they send their children, they send my grandchildren to church with my husband and my daughter. There's three of them. And, they went to vacation Bible school all last week and they had a good time. One of the grandbabies told me yesterday, she said, I miss, vacation Bible school. She had a good time. It was fun. And that's okay. But one of the mothers, she doesn't really consider herself Christian anymore. She said, but I don't know what else to do. She said, it gave me a good foundation. And so I don't know what else to do but to send her to church because, I need her to have some kind of foundation. And I mean, I don't discourage it. I understand where she's coming from. And I just kind of just letting her figure that out for herself. I don't think anything that I would say would be beneficial. I think she just has to work that out for herself. And she will, she will.
Mm.
So, but yeah, we respect each other, and, we don't really talk about it. That's kind of the best way with everybody is just not to discuss it. My husband and I, we try not to discuss it. We do much better if we just don't. We've got a lot of other things we can talk about besides religion and church. So
that's awesome. I love how you're sort of alluding to the idea too that some people just aren't ready, but it's like they're not ready yet, and it doesn't mean that we're going to jam that down their throats and be like, you'll agree with me someday. That's the way we used to talk when we were Christians. You'll bow your knee one way or the other, either in this life or the next. But just to say that it really is a truism that some people just aren't ready to be unplugged yet, and you wouldn't want people to go prematurely, be like someone who just broke their leg and they're using crutches. There's a time to use those crutches, and you should use them as long as you need them until you're strong enough. And for some people, maybe even it's a mental health issue, but like if the idea of not having a purpose that's like by some grand designer, if the lack of that really sends you into a depression spiral, like, cling to your God while you need to. And, reapproach the topic another day in another way. But it is amazing to think about, but it breaks your heart that you can't at least share some of the information. And I think it's weird when you're a Christian, you really do end up getting this savior complex, and not that you think you are, because you think, Jesus is the savior, I'm just the messenger. But knowing that Jesus isn't real, it's like you actually are kind of the savior. You have a savior complex. Like, I can rescue you from your sins and from hell. And I think a lot of us struggle with that. I certainly struggle with how to approach it. I think it's important to do the work of being able to be available to give people the information.
Yes.
And I think about, like, going back to the prison analogy, if we were all stuck in the same prison, but we've all had the key in our pockets and none of us knew it, and I suddenly just like, oh my goodness, I've got the key right here, and I open the door up, and they're like, well, whatever, but that's not real. And I'm like, no, but you've got a key too, you can get out too. And like, no, it's not true. If I can find some way to help people, or if they're blind, for example, I can say, I can help you cure your blindness and see the light, or leave the cave, Plato's cave. And you want to give people the information, and you want to hope for them that they
Hmm.
really do want the truth more than their current worldview if they don't,
Yeah.
especially if they don't match up. But at the same time, just some people aren't ready. It's just not time yet. And
Yeah.
it's a good reminder for us to be, I think, patient. But I think sometimes when year after year after year goes by, it's like, all right, this is sad. This
Hmm.
is sad. It's heartbreaking. Do you feel like you've seen any progress with either any loved ones at all, where you've been able
Yeah.
to have conversations and find some kind of common ground?
Yes, a little bit, a little bit. You know, like you said, as Christians, we are out here, trying to win people over and whatnot. And it's hard kind of because you do have to let people make up their own mind. And I don't want to be, uh, like I was as a Christian trying to make people see my viewpoint. I don't want to do that because I don't appreciate that when it's done to me. So it's kind of hard because I am a teacher. The things that I was doing as a Christian, like that, I'm still that person. So I like to teach and I like to encourage people and I like to help people. And being a non-believer, you can't just share that with any and everybody because then you're going to be treated differently because some people, that just sparks fear and some people like, oh, I can't be a part of that. I can't be around that. It's just a thing of I want to share with everybody. I want to tell everybody. And that's kind of why I started the podcast because I can't just go out here and talk to everybody about what I believe and what I don't believe anymore. And so I created the podcast because I can share that with like-minded people and I can let people that are doubting or that have already deconstructed or deconverted and are quiet and silent about it because they think they're alone. The podcast is to say, no, you're not alone. We're here and we're here for you. So if you ever want to talk about it, or if you ever need somebody, or you just need more information, you can come to the podcast. You can hit me up on TikTok or whatever. Like I'm here. Especially
Mm.
women. I really want to start like a Discord, um, and just with helping women because I had a woman reach out to me, and her husband is really giving her a hard time about her non-belief and she struggles like to the point that she doesn't even want me to call her. Like we spoke on the phone for a really long time one time, and she was like, "Well, I'm afraid he might check my messages and wonder who is this that you're talking to, or check my call out and wonder who, and find out that it's somebody that's deconstructing. Then it's going to create a problem for her. So she and I can't even talk on the phone. And I just want to be able to be there for women who need somebody that they can talk to that understands them. So
That's awesome. So important. So important for us to
yeah,
be able to find community after we deconvert. It's such a weird thing when you go from having the church and friends and family, all of a sudden many of us for a while are loners, and it's
yeah,
like you're starting over. It's funny.
hmm,
I used to think in many ways that we need to sort of rebuild community after
hmm,
deconversion, and I think we do. I think it's a very important piece of the puzzle. But it's funny. I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like I've learned to appreciate the loneliness in a sense. Like
hmm,
I feel like it's more accurate to what I feel like is going on in the universe. Like if
yeah,
you think about it this way, think there's whatever billions or trillions of stars, planets, whatever it is, and at the moment we don't have any evidence that there's anybody else out there. We are in many ways sort of in our minds at least we're alone in the universe, and the universe is huge, and we're
yeah,
this little teeny snippet of consciousness that may or may not be the only ones out there. And our lives are so short when at least especially when you used to think about eternity, it's like our lives really are pretty short. And by the time you really get your life together, you're kind of an old person. At least I feel like I am. You're like,
that's
I
why I
finally
need
got my
50 more.
exactly. Be like you want to kind of start over and go back and take all the stuff you learned by the time you're 50, 60, 70, and have it again when you're a teenager. But life feels short. Life feels lonely. People come and go. People you thought were going to be there forever aren't there forever.
Yeah,
And you learn through there's all kinds of situations that you really are more alone than you thought. And at time, if you're for some people, that's really a scary thought. And maybe it's easier for me because I tend to be an introvert. But there's a part of me that's learned to really appreciate the idea that it is what it is,
hmm,
and like to learn to really appreciate the fact that all that time I was talking to God, I was really talking to myself. And that
Mhm.
if, especially when you bring in the idea that you a lot of this journey of healing is about self-love. And so
Yes.
a lot of this is self-talk. So you're learning to not just appreciate your own mind and be at home in yourself, but also learning to talk kindly to yourself. You saying, you wicked person, you nasty person, your righteousness is like filthy rags. And it's like, now I need
Yes.
to relearn how to talk to myself.
Mhm.
And you become your own best friend in a sense. I know it sounds kind of funny to say it that way, but like you become your own best friend. And I think I'm learning to enjoy both sides of the community, which I'm certainly, I appreciate being plugged in with YouTube channel and Facebook and all that. But at the same time, I'm learning to appreciate my own time with myself. And it's
Mhm.
just, it's weird. Does that make
I
sense at all?
get it.
You know what I mean?
I get it. Cause yes, self love, that's the key word. That is the key word, self love. I love myself. And I think about all the things that I've been through in my life and all the things that I've done to hurt myself and feeling beat down and unloved and unlovable and how like now I love myself a lot and it's just a really good space to be in to like you said, I'm not filthy rags. I'm not I'm not this heathen that, that's just worthless and good for nothing that needs a savior. That's not who I am. I saved myself and I just really it just feels good. You know, I had a little bit of an issue this morning, a difficult conversation with the loved one this morning and it had me, a little down. But I find that when I get down these days, I bounce back much quicker. I bounce back much quicker.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's okay. Whoever stays, great. Whoever doesn't stay, I'll adjust. You know, I can pivot and I've pivoted and adjusted so many times in my life. I've recreated my life so many times that and I'll do whatever I need to do to keep my sanity and to keep my peace.
Mm, I love it.
Uh,
I wonder at times if some of that too is comes from just the reality that we no longer are asking ourselves all these questions of God, what did I do wrong to deserve this? Like, because you feel like if the Bible's clear, if you obey me, I'll bless you. If you don't obey me, I'll curse you. So if
yeah.
there's an issue and if it's not working right, it's like you don't have enough faith, or you're
Yeah.
disobedient. You have a presumptuous sin. You've let the devil in somehow. All these
Yes.
questions, you haven't prayed enough, whatever it is, and
Yeah.
instead of like asking, what did I do wrong? That this is
Yes.
this God? And also, it's like you might have done everything right. God's just testing you, like Job. God, you didn't do anything wrong. Which one is it, God? Which one? And you
Which
never
one
you
is
never
it?
get the answer. You never really know which one. You just keep trying different things, push buttons
Mhm,
until something works. And to
mhm.
realize that's all just like card tricks and smoke and mirrors. And it's like your expectations go down. Like I don't expect life to go right. I expect relationships to come and go, to break. I
Mhm.
expect to be misunderstood. I expect to have health issues and money issues and job issues. And none of that is necessarily connected to anything spiritual in any way
Yeah.
anymore. And
Mhm.
once your expectations for all that kind of disappear, you're like, I just have to do my best and bring my power and bring my wisdom if I can and make the best of it. It makes it so much more simple. Like just learn what you can and
Yeah.
move on. And it's
Uh-huh.
amazing how it changes.
Yes. And it's amazing how you don't have to feel like that's the only way you can be a good person is, you know, by being this Christian and you can't be good any other way. And, it feels good to just be so free from all of that. But yes, because, I mentioned this before in one of my other videos. I mentioned how, when things are going wrong, we blame ourselves. Like I'm not doing something right. But when things go good, we give God all the credit. Like, why is that? Like, if it's bad, it's on me. But if it's good, oh, thank you, Lord, for giving me this or for blessing me. But no, I don't have to do that anymore.
Mm.
I don't have to do that anymore. But
The,
I,
the, the truth
go
will set
ahead.
you free.
Yes, yes. I meant to tell you this in the beginning, but you were my inspiration for starting my YouTube podcast.
Oh, well, awesome. Thank you for telling me that.
So
That's great.
yeah, so I started watching a lot of your podcasts, and they were very helpful, and I was really enjoying them. And that was another aspect that just kind of helped me to realize that I wasn't by myself, that I wasn't crazy, that there's other people out there. And I really, really enjoyed, watching. I don't get to watch as often as I did. But I used to watch, like, I was binge watching them. And I just, I think, so you were when you interviewed Tristan and you said to him, you enjoyed the interview and everything. You said, you should start a podcast. And when you said that to him, you were saying it to me. And I was like, I should start a podcast. And I literally, within 3 weeks, I was doing my first interview. Because
Wow.
that's just kind of who I am. Once I get my mind on something, it's happening. It's
Yeah.
happening. And I did. And I interviewed Tristan too. He was one of the people that I interviewed. And my first interview was with the guys who wrote the book Christ Before Jesus.
Okay.
And that was my very first interview. And but yes, it was watching your interview with Tristan that instant when I decided that, hey, I'm gonna start a podcast.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I'm so glad you shared that with me. And I'll have the link beneath this video for the interview with Tristan if anyone wants to go to that one next. He did a great job. He's awesome. In terms of, I was just going to mention, in terms of your doing the channel, one of the things that I should add about that whole concept of like, we don't want to have a savior complex. At the same time, I think it's important to note that a lot of these stories do become, as they say, someone's survival manual. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's not like we're trying to say, I have the only message and I have the only way to help you. And you need to just, I'll drop everything, listen to me. But the reality is that some of these stories are going to relate to people in ways that
Mm-hmm.
nobody else is going to. And someone else is going to be like, I feel like my life's at a complete dead end and it feels dark. Maybe they're even depressed or suicidal for goodness sake. And it's like, wow, like what a sad place to be. And then they hear
Yeah.
somebody's story and somebody from a channel like yours or mine comes along and they share their story and then someone else listens. It's like, wow, like I feel like I've just found like a, you know, kindred spirit. And I feel
Yeah.
like this person can really, help me out. On that note, I did want to ask too, this is a really good segue. Um, Sort of a wrap up question. You can add anything else that you wanted to here. But
Mm-hmm.
when you look at people that you come across, they're going through this and it's really just the hardest part of this, where they're really feeling like I'm going to lose my relationships, marriage, or kids, or family, whatever, loved ones. I might lose my mental health a little bit because I'm like depressed about, I thought I had an afterlife to go to, and now I'm not sure.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of reasons that this can be really difficult, and some other people they're going to lose their little job over this when they sort of come out of the closet that they're no longer a
Mm-hmm.
Christian. It's really it's a journey. It's a real journey, and I feel like it's for those of us that can kind of come out of it quickly and smoothly. It's a bit of a
Mm-hmm.
privileged position, and we need to be sensitive to people that when they do this their lives are going to kind of fall apart for a while. Can you give us a sort of a final word here as a word of encouragement to someone that's going through the hardest part of this? What would you say to somebody? And obviously, there's stuff we'd all say, go to a counselor and so forth. But besides that, like, is there anything else that you've come across from your experience that you'd say might be a good word of encouragement for someone in that spot?
Yeah. I think the main thing is just to learn how to love yourself. Learn that you know, you're not this miserable, bad person. You're not born in sin. You're not a filthy rags. You are a good person. You can continue to be a good person and do great things, even without, the fear of hell, and the fear of punishment, and just study, studying and looking at the facts and taking the time to think critically and ask questions. Put your energy into that and you'll start getting the answers that you need, and you'll start building that foundation, a stronger foundation where that previous foundation is crumbled and fallen. If you take time to actually put in the effort and the work to learn about where the history of this religion and the Bible and everything, then that will start building a foundation that will take care of that fear. And and then reach out and look for like-minded people so that you do have someone that you can talk to, even if it's just online. If it's me or Tim or whoever, just even if it's online and not someone that you know personally, just remember that you're important. And even though we're different than the masses, it's okay to be different. It's okay to be different. I love being different. I've always been different. And just just be strong. And be encouraged. Be of good cheer.
Good stuff. Good stuff. I will say too, one thing that's really been coming to my mind a lot over the last few months is just the idea that when you first deconstruct and deconvert, a lot of it is the emotional drain of it all, but also the fact that we just don't have the words to describe what happened to us. And it's
Hmm.
interesting, I think some of these self-empowerment and autonomy and self-respect comes as you get the verbiage, and some of that is going to
Hmm.
come from listening to people that you interview or I interview, and we hear
Hmm.
them speaking, and maybe they've had some more conversations than we have. They're, a year or two or five into it, and they've had more time to think about how this works. And
Yeah.
so even something as simple as saying the Yahweh character is a literary character, or the Yahweh
Hmm.
character is a psychopathic character, or blood magic is
Hmm.
weird.
Yeah.
Eating, pretending to eat some dead man's flesh and drink a dead man's blood for
Hmm.
communion is really weird. A
Yeah.
God who demands you cut off the end of little boys' genitals is really weird. And it's like when you
Hmm.
first, and we could go on for hours on the verbiage that comes, but just, and even just not even the language, but just putting dots together and saying simple things like, does it make sense that blood should be required for forgiveness to occur?
Yeah.
And that isn't like that isn't like some kind of lofty language. That's just connecting dots, but saying, well, I can forgive without blood, obviously. So why can't the God of the universe? And the more that you go into it, I think the more you get the language. And I love, channels like yours and your TikTok, where you get a chance to, you're really equipping people with how to connect those dots in a way that the church
Hmm.
basically just kind of, if you have any kind of self doubt about yourself or doubt about the Lord, it kind of squashes them and just kind of says, check your brain at
Yeah.
the door. And as you stop doing that and you get the language, it transforms everything. So
Hmm.
good stuff. Well, can I ask, is there anything for your YouTube channel that we can expect as you kind of gear up for the next few pushes of the next few years and make it, sort of what you envision it could be? What can we
Yeah.
expect there? And should someone who wants to do an interview, maybe they've interviewed with me or not, but if they want to do an interview, should they reach out to you? Like, what would you say to anybody looking at your channel?
Yeah, they could definitely reach out. I'm kind of on a hiatus at the moment because just dealing with some family things. My uncle's in the hospital, and I've been on hiatus for a couple of months right now. I've canceled any of the interviews I had scheduled recently. I've canceled them all, and I do have a few other interviews that I've already done that I'm going to upload over the next hopefully few days that should have already been uploaded. But as far as any scheduling any other interviews right now, I don't think I would like you to reach out to me if you want to be on there. But I'm not ready to schedule them. But just reaching out and let me know you're interested, we great. That's great because I am going to come back eventually. Just got to get some family things worked out and I'll be back. But in the meantime, you can always go and buy some of my merch, some of my t-shirts and hoodies,
There you go.
my deconstruction hoodies and whatnot on my Shopify. So
Awesome.
we'll make
Awesome.
sure you have the link for that.
Yeah. Well, I'll put all the links for these things we've been talking about beneath this video. Definitely please go like and subscribe and check out the interviews. You've done quite a few interviews so far.
Hmm.
It's amazing the work you've done, and I can't wait to see how your channel grows over the next few years. I'm sure it'll be awesome. We certainly wish you the best with your uncle and the other family situations. But I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story, and I hope that your influence continues. We need voices like yours in the community. But I'll just wrap up by saying we've been speaking with Diane Green. Diane, thank you so much for sharing your story today. It's been great to get to know you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.